each generation, let's say from the baby boomers forward, where we had the big moonshot, literally, relate to the space program from their perspective. So the boomers, it's this moonshot, anything is possible. Then you have the space shuttle, more the utilitarian aspect of it, the sprint aspect of it, to use your words. Then you have the space station, right? Which is
Right.
more, these are my words, communal or group or team oriented, a little bit longer term, impact, consciously at least. And then what's going on with the rover and landing on Mars and then the satellites and everything around that. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I think certainly I was very young when we landed on the moon, and that had a huge impact on me. And I do remember that feeling that everybody thought, wow, anything's possible. And I think it inspired young people to want to strive. Space Shuttle was an exciting vehicle. It was being developed when I was a teenager, young teenager. And I remember building model kind of space shuttles and things like that. And like you said, it became more of a utilitarian vehicle. And in a way, NASA was a little bit of a victim of its own success because people kind of got used to having space shuttle flights, every few months. And it kind of became mundane until we had the Challenger accident. And then, of course, several years later, we had the Columbia accident. And, and that spelled the eventual end of the program. Right. Space Station is kind of the same thing. If you think about Space Station, it is the most incredible engineering marvel. I mean, think about it. Former World War II, Cold War enemies came together and built the most audacious structure ever even attempted in space. It's so much bigger than Space Station Mir was or anything like that. And everything actually fit together. I mean, think about it. The core module from Russia, the pieces from Russia had never touched the American piece at the interface. So how do you know it's actually going to fit?
Right.
It's actually going to come together, but it did. And everything worked, even these mechanisms that even the astronauts, we would look at some of these mechanisms and say, these just seem so Rube Goldberg. How could it ever work? And it did. It all worked. Yeah. And so it's pretty incredible. But by the same token, people have gotten used to missions going to the ISS until something, the big story recently was that Butch and Sonny, two astronauts that were stuck on board in what their 8-day test flight on a Boeing Starliner turned into a 9-month odyssey. And they're thankfully back on Earth just last week. But I think the young generation, they do look at space and they, you have a subset that are inspired by it. Maybe not the same impact that Apollo had on that generation, the boomer generation. But, there's certainly a subset of today's, future astronauts that are looking at, return to the moon and then SpaceX. I think SpaceX, Elon Musk just announced that in the next year or two, he's actually, maybe it might take a little bit longer. He's usually pretty optimistic.
Sure.
But he's actually going to launch a Starliner to Mars, not with people on board, but actually launch one to Mars, and so this dream of Mars, I think, is the next generation's big thing to look for because, I've always said we've been 20 years from Mars since 1969, since we went on the moon. Nobody questioned that in 20 years we'd be on Mars. And of course, we haven't even returned to the moon since 72. So, I think the future is exciting, but it's going to be primarily led by companies like SpaceX. And now Blue Origin has launched their New Glenn rocket. And so, I know that Jeff Bezos seems very serious about building infrastructure in what we call cislunar space, and space around the Earth and the moon. And so it's going to be an exciting future. And I think NASA will always be a part of that. And ideally, they would be because NASA's become a big bureaucracy. It's not the agency it used to be. But NASA is still the defining excellence in operations and running space missions and training astronauts, executing these missions and making it look easy.
Yeah. And they do. And the level of mastery when a master makes it look easy, how much work and practice and energy and time and resources go and the failures that have you arrive at that mastery. And, not to tie the bow here, but it is true. You speak at these events, there's thousands of people, 20 plus hotels, and it's all synced together, and the doors open at a certain time, and the speakers up on the keynote stage mic'd up at a certain time, and the mag screens light up, and people are there getting an amazing experience. It's going to impact them and have a ripple effect out. So to kind of bring it full circle, whether you're washing dishes or multitasking in a restaurant or commanding the space station, there's all these universal aspects of behavior and way to perform that can apply. And so these lessons from space, Commander Chow, we just appreciate you